Let's look at another example of a hypothesis test. In example 6, they say that a TV advertising executive claims that people spend an average of 10 hours a week watching soap operas. We take a random sample of 50 people that reported a mean of 11 hours with a standard deviation of 2.6 hours. Let's test the claim with a 5% level of significance. We're going to begin the same way. We're going to start by finding the null and alternative hypothesis. At the beginning of the problem, they state that people spend an average or mean equal to exactly 10 hours. Mu equals to 10, that's going to be a null hypothesis, which is going to be the claim in this case. The complement of equals to is not equals to, so our alternative hypothesis is that the mean is not equal to 10. The level of significance was stated as 5%, that's going to be 0.05. That's our alpha value. Because we have a large sample, a sample of size 50, we will be able to use the z-test for this in order to find the p-value. Let's go ahead and do that. So I get out my calculator. We go to stat. Maybe we go to stat. Give me 1 sec, I think it froze. Okay, now it should be working again. Let's see. Okay, now it works. So we go to stat, over to tests. We're going to do a z-test on this. The original value that's going to go here, the mu sub 0, that's the one that's used in the hypotheses. That's the number 10. The standard deviation was reported as 2.6. When we conducted our sample, we found the sample mean was 11, so that's x bar. Our sample size, they said, was a sample of size 50. And we now need to choose the appropriate tailed test. Because the alternative hypothesis said that it was not equal to, we are going to select the not equal to option. We can go ahead, hit calculate, and hit enter. We get the z test score if we want it. That's 2.72. And to 3 decimal places, our p-value would be 0.007. To make the decision, we're going to compare p to alpha. P is 0.007. Alpha is 0.05, and we're in the situation where p is less than alpha, so the conclusion would be to reject the null hypothesis. So we are going to reject the null in this situation. We should write out the final conclusion here. Because we rejected the null, the sentence will begin with, there is sufficient evidence to, and then because the claim was the null hypothesis, anytime the claim is the null hypothesis, it will be to reject the claim. So the conclusion is there is sufficient evidence to reject the claim. We'll do 2 more examples. This is now moving into section 7.3. A lot of the same ingredients, but the one thing that's going to change this time is that we will be dealing with small sample sizes, which means that we are going to need to use the t-test or a t-statistic in order to calculate our p-value. In example 7, they say that a repair shop believes that people travel more than 3,500 miles between oil changes. A random sample of 8 cars getting an oil change has a mean distance of 3,375 miles since having an oil change, with a standard deviation of 225 miles. At the alpha equals 0.10 level of significance, do we have enough evidence to support the shop's claim? So we begin the same way. We need the null and alternative hypothesis. The shop claims that people travel more than, so mean is greater than 3,500 miles between oil changes. Mu greater than, that's going to be an alternative hypothesis, which also is our claim because that's what they were stating in this case. The complement of greater than is less than or equal to. So the null hypothesis is that the mean is less than or equal to 3,500. The test is being done at the alpha equals 0.10 level of significance. Now all we need left is to calculate our p-value in order to make our conclusion. We're going to go to stat, we go over to tests, and this time because we had a small sample size, we only had a sample of size 8, which is less than 30, we're going to be using the t-test. The setup and the input for the t-test is exactly the same as it was for the z-test. We need to put in the mean mu sum naught first. That's going to be 3,500. That's the number that appears in your hypotheses. Our sample mean, they said that the sample mean was 3,375. The standard deviation was 225. Our sample size was 8, and we need to choose the appropriate tail test. The alternative was greater than, so it was a right tail test. So we go over here to greater than, hit enter, and we can now go ahead and hit calculate. This time we get a t-test statistic, which is negative 1.57, and a p-value of 0.920 if we round it to 3 places. Now that we have our p-values in the t-test, we can compare p to alpha. P is 0.920, alpha is 0.10. Because p is greater than alpha, the decision would be to fail to reject the null. So we're going to fail to reject the null for this problem. We now need to summarize it to wrap up our final answer. Because we failed to reject the null, we will start off by saying that there is insignificant evidence, or there isn't enough evidence at the 10% level of significance. 2, and now we have to see which one is the claim. Recall that anytime the claim is the alternative, it will be of the form to support the claim. So there isn't enough evidence at the 10% level of significance to support the claim. This problem is very much like the last few we did. The difference this time is when you have a small sample size, namely less than 30, we're going to be using the t-test to get our p-value. Let's take a look at one more. In example 8, they say that a travel association claims that the mean daily meal cost for 2 adults traveling together on vacation in San Francisco is $105. We take a random sample of 20 such groups of adults, and we find that their mean daily cost is $110 with a standard deviation of $8.50. Is there enough evidence to reject the claim at the alpha equals 0.05 level of significance? So they're claiming that the average meal for 2 people is 105. That is that the mean equals 105. That's the claim. The complement of this would be not equals. So the mean is not equal to 105 is the alternative hypothesis. The level of significance for this one, that's going to be alpha equals 0.05. We're in a situation again where because we have a small sample size, it's less than 30, it's 20 in this case, we're going to use the t-test again. We go to stat, go over to tests, option 2, t-test. The mean value that's reported is 105. Our sample mean was 110. The standard deviation was 8.5. Sample size was 20. And for the appropriate tailedness, the alternative was not equal to, is a 2-tailed test. So we select not equal to. Can go ahead and hit calculate. And we would get a t-test score of 2.63. And the p-value that we wanted is 0.016. So P is 0.016. We can now go ahead and compare P to alpha. P is 0.016. Alpha was 0.05. Because P is less than alpha, the decision will be to reject the null. So we will be rejecting the null in this example. Because we reject the null, our sentence begins with, there is sufficient evidence at the 5% level significance. And then 2, because the claim is the null, it'll always be of the form to reject the claim. So there is enough evidence at the 5% level significance to reject the claim that the average meal cost was $110 for a couple in San Francisco.